Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for those out west. Welcome to this webinar on how to manage procurement during the crisis. Let me first thank the National Research Council of Canada for its financial support. The webinar today will last about 1 hour, including 45 minutes of presentation in a 15 minutes period for questions. We will send you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation shortly after the meeting, along with a quick survey. During the presentation, I invite you to send us your questions. You may use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and write us the questions. We will answer them during the period question at the end of the webinar. So let me introduce myself. My name is Pierre-Laurent Boudria. I am an engineer and manufacturing advisor with STIC. For those who do not know us, STIC is a multi-sectoral business association. Our members are mainly manufacturers. Our mission is to foster the development of manufacturing companies and supply chains. We hold networking activities. We help buyers with their business opportunities. We also have professional services to help organizations improve their management processes and implement best practices. Today, I'm accompanied by Réal Julien, President of J2. Réal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Pierre-Laurent. So my name is Réal Julien, President of J2 Procurement Management. We are a consulting firm in supply chain. Our mission is to help SMEs and organizations in order to increase their supply chain activity, so the efficiency. And we are in business since 2008. 50 people. So all of our activities are related to supply chain in terms of training, in terms of supply chain diagnostic. We do some temporary outsourcing and permanent outsourcing activity too. So thank you for the STIC. Thank you for the CNRC for inviting us in this first English webinar ever on my side.
Thank you, Réal. So let's start with the presentation. Just very quickly before we get into the main subject about the general context and issues. We see throughout Canada a lot of business closures in non-essential sectors. Some companies which are multi-sectoral will reduce their activities. Some will be repositioning themselves to new essential products to manufacture them. Some will increase production in the essential sectors. And for us today, there's a major disruption in the supply chains. Closer to us with the companies, general context and issues. Everybody knows the staff is affected with the ability and the changing work environment. There's a significant change in the demand and sales, generally speaking, for every company. There's a potential repositioning that might be going on in some of them. This brings some changes in the operations. We do have lots of contacts with companies which have difficulties in procuring the good products, the goods, products, and services. Mainly, the companies will put on hold all their projects, their normal strategic plan, and of course, major impact on profitability and liquidity. So the cash flow becomes an issue. That said, we have to keep that in mind in order to be able to manage the the supply chains and to manage, well, to have the good procurement activities going on in the different companies. So Riyad and I discussed a long while, and we established a 9-step approach to manage procurement better in this situation. We will just now list them, but we will cover them more deeply during the presentation. So the first step is to establish an overall corporate strategy and identify the specific procurement objectives. To identify, this is at the company level. At the procurement level, you will need to identify the procurement priorities according to the products and the current company activities, and also the external demand and availability. After that, you will develop a precise plan and follow it with a prioritized action plan. You will want to control the inventory, manage the active suppliers and in progress orders, as they might not be all necessary in this context, even though they're active, considering the current situation. The company will maybe pausing some activity. Put in place some alternative sources wherever needed. Of course, when the material comes in, you will need in this troubled period to manage quality from a very closer perspective, while in progress and upon receipt. And then you will need to plan the return to normal activities, if that may be. After all that is aside, is past us, you will have to conduct a crisis management post-mortem, which will lead hopefully to a new action plan to improve for, hopefully not, but to potential other crisis in the futures, in the future. So, concerning the corporate strategies and procurement objectives, first of all, before knowing what's awaited from the procurement function, it's important that the companies understand their specific context of business. Really, what they need to do is a quick and moving strategic planning. We're currently managing in a crisis. So first step is, of course, understanding the specific context, whether this will touch the customers, the sales. Let's not forget every contractual obligations and all the terms and agreements that we already have here. The goal is to understand what the company will be supplying in the future. The impact on suppliers, the impact on general operations of the current crisis, and of course, we have the finances and liquidity. The cash flow is very important in this context, as this different clients and suppliers will be disrupted. Once we have established that the specifics of our company context, we'll get into the strategies, the general strategies of the company. It's very important to be very specific on the priorities, so concerning the clients and the products. This will lead directly to the operations and what's awaited from the procurement services. Some orders might be put on hold, others will simply change, and there might be new products that will come forward. So it will be important to identify the proper activities that will be going on in the company, and possibly, if you can, manage all those orders that are in the system and that might be polluting the data for use in the future. So once these strategies are included, you need to set or manage. You need to set financial and general objectives for more in the specific for the company. For that, you will need to identify performance indicators that are relevant. What we include as relevant is everything that is closer to the short term, because we're managing an emergency, so that is close to the throughput, and it is mainly direct performance indicators for the various functions of the company. Complex indicators such as on-time delivery, or complex financial such as the month-end P&L is just not close enough to drive any action plan at this point. So we really recommend that you set goals and objectives in perspective that you are on short-term decisions. Of course, considering the many changes, the ever evolving situation, you will need to update the strategies on an ongoing basis at the corporate level. So we do recommend that you establish a high frequency monitoring body. That might be just your management committee, but we do suggest that you organize a war room, or even more organized it with the OBEA method, that is from the Toyota method, to manage the goals and objectives, to manage the actual action items and the problems. You will need to assign the functional managers to monitor the information. There's a loop to be put in place there to adjust, to make the adjustments based on performance and context in real time. So that said, you will need after that to define what's expected from the as a procurement contributions to the general company objectives. And be clear on that. If you have in your company a procurement manager, or if you have rather an office clerk that's emitting POs, you will have different situations there, but we assure you that you will need to have something closer to procurement management here. Because you will not be able to buy as you used to with the same quantities and considering all the products and all. You will have different objectives, including financial objectives there. So we recommend that you focus on actual and current needs. Put aside everything that's not necessary for the actual period. So if it includes clearing some data, you will need to do it. You will need to assess the liquidity using measurable indicators. It is expected that some clients may try to improve their cash flow on your company. You will need to pass this on to your clients, to your suppliers. Excuse me. So. It's a chain. Just make sure that your company is not being choked there. And then you will need to put in place a daily reporting structure that will provide information to at the corporate level. Réal, I think it's now your turn to talk us more precisely about the the procurement management itself. I'll just allow you to control the computer. There you have it.
Thank you, Pierre-Laurent.
You're welcome.
So as Pierre-Laurent was saying a little bit earlier, after that your organization has identified their new strategy or new goal, what's going to be the what's going to be the impact on the supply chain, so your supply chain. So here's 3 points that we'll develop more further. So the first point is again, what is the impact of your organization strategy and the objective on your supply chain? And after that, we can talk about some points like your labor, your level of inventory, and so on, so on. You will have to establish a list of your critical suppliers and analyze their impact. Was the supplier base that you have is critical, and how you can work with them. And after that, and you will see during the rest of the presentation, we will put a lot of emphasis on the communication plan. Okay, so I hope that's gonna work this time. Is it got a lag or not?
That's good. Got it.
Okay, great. So supply chain impact assessment. After you know the way that your organization will work in this situation, you will have to analyze your BOM, your product, your pieces, in order to make pre-decision, or at least knowing already know what you can substitute in terms of pieces, in terms of product, and so on. So just for example, working glove, if your product includes a working glove, if it's not a specific working glove, perhaps your pre-decision that will be that if I got a problem with my actual supplier, I can go find this working glove at the Home Hardware or Canadian Tire and near the corner. And after that, you have to identify the critical parts and priority, okay? Because based on your production plan, okay, you will have to verify your PO schedule. You will have to also analyze the inventory and revise your inventory based on your new reality and make some projection. So perhaps the actual coverage that you have with your inventory will stay you longer or shorter depending how is your production plan. And after that, when all these 3 things has been already analyzed, we suggest you to revise your critical supplier list, and again analyze their impact. Is they still have an impact on your BOM? I know that we have to manage in the, let's call that exceptional circumstance, but you have to take some exceptional decision based on this the picture. And again, I think you have to find a way to make your decision faster. So take the time to go fast though. So if you have done a pre-analyze and pre-decision, that's going to help your situation, and by the way, help the situation of your entity. Critical supplier analysis. What is your actual status with your supplier? Okay, do you have a good relationship with your supplier? Does everything's going well? And again, something's going to be very, very important, as Pierre-Laurent was saying earlier. Don't forget the payable, okay? Because if your if for any reason it's that and that's held for you, but perhaps your actual supplier will say, okay, I don't have mind to deliver quicker, more quantity, but it's going to be COD. So you have to validate those things with your inside financial department. Okay, and also another thing that we forgot during the normal situation, it's validate the legal part of the supply chain. So your supplier, does your supplier is under contract? If yes, do your contract included a force majeure article? And does it have some termination for convenience or termination clause? And whether their scope, okay? So you will have to take the time to read that and analyze that in order to create your action plan. And after that, we are talking about contract validation. But what is your term and condition on your PO? And a question: do you have terms and condition on your PO? So that could have an impact on your action plan. Okay, and after that, if everything is okay, you will have to revise your PO delivery and your PO requirement. So perhaps some lines going to be some line of your PO is going to be it's going to be needed. Sorry, it's going to be needed ASAP, and someone's going to have to be pushed back. Communication plan, general advice, and it's applicable in this situation, in a crisis situation, but it's an advice that we can implement all the time. It should be a best practice. Okay, ensure that you understand the need to be communicate. Okay, and be transparent with the people that you are working with, either on supplier side or inside of your organization. Okay, so when we talk about to understand the need to be communicate, it's who will communicate, what's going to be communicate, when, how. So you have to establish a chain commandment. Okay, and that's you will have to ask this requirement to your supply base too. Okay, and ensure to have the same vision of all the parties, your company, the supplier, and more you got the end user, so the final customer that it's involved in the supply chain. Okay, and also in internal way, we suggest you to, as Pierre Laurent was saying, at the upper side of the management, but internal of your supply chain with your people, create a war room, a crisis management unit, and assign a communication, as I was telling earlier. On the supplier side, okay, I think that you have to create a regular meeting, okay, in order to exchange the real communication, okay, and share, for example, the forecast. You will ask your supplier to provide you an update on their progress, product to be received, and sometimes during this kind of situation, personally, I already lived this kind of situation in the past. You will perhaps work with a side tool like an Excel sheet and forget the actual PO date and use a covering chart to be in order to receive and order the real quantity based on your production line. Again, action plan. I was telling that on the slide before. The strategy was based must be based on a mutual trust, respect. Okay. And if you have treated well your supplier base, you're gonna have the support that you need for sure. Uh, your supply chain, ask your supplier how they how they are they are in the situation. So does their supply chains or their supply chain of your suppliers supply chain are still working? What is the capacity right now? Are they working at full capacity, 50%? Okay, and ask your supplier if they ask their supplier the same element. Okay, ask your supplier if they got any level inventory on the product that you bought from them. Okay, perhaps you're gonna have to pull on their inventory. And as I said again earlier, you can co-develop cover chart based on the projection master plan. Okay. Also, a thing very 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 important. Okay, listen your supplier. Okay, they are the expert, and they are there to help you, and they can propose you some material substitution or a new way to produce a part. So please listen your supplier and take the information and share that into your own organization. Okay. Other thing, inventory. You have to validate the accuracy of your inventory and inventory system. So what you have in your system, does it reflect what you have uh, on your floor? Okay, because sometimes we have done a lot of the inventory diagnostic, and this thing it's a week, so you have to be worry about what is in your system. It's reflect what you got on your floor, and ensure that your MRP requirement is accurate based on the new production master plan. Okay, and perhaps you will have to increase or decrease the min max Kanban. So in order to keep very good eyes on your liquidity, because most of the time inventory is a liquidity, we suggest you to implement some inventory cycle count. Okay. After that, again, and I put some big emphasis on that. Review your purchasing order sequencing. Okay. Uh, Another thing that I missed to talk to you about: when you analyze your inventory, you should know your long lead time item and put action on those long lead time item. Okay, you need to have a good visibility on your quality system. So do they have a rejection? Do you have a non-compliance that could have an impact on your product scheduling and product quantity? Okay, and again, be very agile and flexible, and ask your organization to give you the visibility of any change on their production master plan. And also, before I give back to Pierre Laurent, uh, make sure that you have a tracking record of your change that you have done in your system in terms of min-max, Kanban. I don't know other trigger, but keep a tracking of that. Okay, because when you're gonna be back at the normal situation, you have to be sure to 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 get all the thing at the normal thing. So at this time, I will pass you back the presentation, Mr. Pierre Laurent.
Thank you. Okay. So this said, excuse me. This said, once we've managed internally, it doesn't mean that everything will be functioning as normal. We may have to find alternate procurement sources. Um, in order to find them, you first need to establish, because it's a lot of work, you first need to establish the priorities there of the work. So you need to consider which key products are currently unavailable, or the contractors who are closed. These should be aimed first, and then every other material or services that are available should be should be investigated in the second place. You will have a bit of time if you have limited availability of products and services. So you will want to manage those in the third place. Then during the crisis, as we mentioned earlier, the situation of the different companies is evolving constantly. So it might be a great idea to just create a quick contingency plan for the current suppliers. So identify an alternative source for every key product. Even though the current suppliers are online now, doesn't mean it will be the case earlier down, further down the crisis. So you may as well be ready to face the situation if that might be the case. When it comes to identifying the alternative procurement sources, you need to consider three types of sources. First of all, there's the replacement suppliers. They will provide the exact same product or service as you're used to having. So this is the less complicated one. We'll cover those more deeply after. After that, just a bit more complicated is to introduce a new supplier. And then if it still doesn't work, then you need to look at changing the product itself. So alternative solutions and products will be considered, and that is by far the most costly and also the most risky alternative to procurement source. To procurement alternatives. So if we talk about replacement suppliers, we call it very often the Plan B. These are suppliers that we already know. They've been identified for critical parts in the supplier contingency plan, or we have like a second supplier that we maintain. They have like 20% of our volume, and we might want temporarily bring them up to maybe up to 100% of the volume if the other supplier is unable to provide us with the services or parts. So the approach to take there is first to contact the suppliers. If you think that just sending a purchase order is going to provide you with products and suppliers, you might be wrong there. You need to understand their current capacity, their situation, and what's the real availability on their part for products and services. You may have, if you haven't used those suppliers in a long time, to reconfirm the products and services if that's all necessary. Once you understand that, before you send in a PO, make sure you reach an agreement for the current needs. Don't place a surprise order, as we mentioned. You will just make sure that they are able to supply you with what you expect to achieve the operation continuity. And then once all is set, as Real mentioned earlier, you will need to follow up with them as with any other active supplier. So you will need to set those communications with them on a regular basis. Second source of alternate suppliers is new suppliers. There are different sources. There are all those you know, but you never did business with before. There are some client references. In the big supply chains, such as in the automobile, the aircraft industry, or other big industries, and they often have a list of approved suppliers, even though there might not be your suppliers currently. It's a great source for finding new ones that can quickly ramp up in your operation. If that still doesn't work, if your supplier is shut down, you might want to contact your supplier's supplier. Then you will be able to learn who else is able to who else has the manufacturing capacity you're seeking. If you're in a market that allows it, you may also contact your competitors or your competitors' references to look for products. And lastly, because it's out of your normal network, you will need to search suppliers. There are different sources such as associations or specialized site you may use, but once again, these are people you don't know, so it's a lot of time investment. The approach to introduce new supplier needs to be fast in the current context. So the approach is to first contact the suppliers to ask about their current status and offer. You will want to accelerate the acceptance process. There are things that are easy to validate, and others that you can live with temporarily, and that you will want to validate after. So in those things, you can quickly validate certifications, the application of standards. You will want to confirm the pricings, timelines, and other capacities and terms and conditions. The things that you will want to quickly check. I know that for long-term agreements and supply, you will need to understand those better. But for the purpose of being quick right now, you just take a quick look at their contingency plan, their history, financial strength, to make sure that they will still be able to deliver according to plan, and get references from other clients if all possible. You will want to validate the products and services in collaboration with engineering. If you can request a sample, I know visit of companies might be complicated in these days, but you can virtually tour the facility, as we did yesterday with one of our clients that we audited in company improvement program yesterday. So, and finally, you will want to conclude an agreement and put in place all the follow-up activities that we discussed earlier. The most complex thing you may do is to introduce alternative solutions and products. That is only reserved when when everything is impossible on the side, because it's more costly, it's more time consuming, and there are much more delays. So there are several different possible levels in there. So different procurement sources might be considered as alternate products and solutions in different markets, because they will need to certify the manufacturing processes or such. If it changes the manufacturing processes, should be considered a new product as well, or new material. Or lastly, but those bring more issues, it's new designs due to their significant impact on your operations and potentially on other supplies and other parts and other activities that are already in place in your place. There are different sources. Again, new products can be available from current suppliers, replacement suppliers, or new suppliers. So the approach, and once again, you want to move quick because of the emergency situation, but you still need to validate the approval steps that are mandatory in your market or sector. So you need to keep that in mind. It's not simply passing a PO there. You want to involve the engineering in the process. Even though they are involved, you should keep as a procurement manager the agreement at the procurement level. So it's not up to engineering to send a PO to reach an agreement, because these are commercial agreements that impact other activities which are not in the field of responsibility of engineering normally. So the role of engineering is to assess the impact of the proposed change, whether it's the impact on the general design or functionality, the manufacturing process, procurement of and total acquisition cost. This is very important there, because the total acquisition cost doesn't consider only the price of the product itself, but other prices to actually getting the stock in your place. The role of engineering will evaluate also the total operating cost, which might be important, especially in new designs, in new manufacturing processes. And they will be in charge of conducting the necessary studies and tests. Of course, if you have new products and services that you use, you need to obtain your client's approval. You need to ensure traceability of any deviation of the current of the normal standards. And after that, when you get them, monitor the first production and validate the product will be key to success. Once we get new products, we said that everybody is being disrupted. So the new products might come in not as usual. So you will need to enhance the receipt inspection procedure. Just there, what we mean is to plan for actions to be taken, to have a systematic approach to obtain the compliance reports from the suppliers in advance, to review the inspection and methodology, provide the necessary tools, and especially, as Réan mentioned earlier, it's very important to provide some feedback to the purchasing process and operations, and to the suppliers, whether it's good or not good, especially if it's not a supplier we're used to dealing with. The goal is always there to accelerate the decision making. What to do with non-compliance is just opt for solutions that are a quicker approach. There are some deviations that can be accepted. You may want to correct or recover, rework, modify, use temporarily. But the more costly solution there is to return the goods to the suppliers because of the delay, and especially if this is going to stop your operations, it is by far more costly to do that, and the impacts are greater there. So try to avoid unnecessary returns to suppliers. You will want to accelerate the investigation. So you will need the full collaboration of the quality department there. The root cause, if it can be identified early or quickly, you will want to do that. But focus on the short-term actions to make sure that the operations won't stop. Request long-term and or medium long-term corrective actions at a later date if all necessary to avoid further delays. Lastly, planning for the return to normal. We don't expect the supplier chains to recover instantly from the current crisis. I know it's all different in the different provinces, from region to region, and from country to country for more complex supply chains. Do not expect that from day one to day two, there will be a dramatic change there. It will be more gradual. So plan for a gradual recovery for the company. You will need to anticipate that there might be changes in the demand of products and goods and sales compared to before the crisis. So planning for the business return to normal, to return to normal, it's basically quite the same steps as we just took. So first, you need to understand the status of the business, whether it's sales, operation, procurement, or finances. You will want to do a temporary business strategic planning there. Review the temporary corporate strategies and financial objectives. So make the projections that will, because these will impact every procurement further down the road. We recommend that you maintain and adjust everything that's in your communication plan, communication structure at the high level. If you have like a war room or such, we recommend that you maintain it, but also at the procurement level, maintain it for a while, as Réal mentioned earlier. Make sure you identify the priorities of action as we did for the managing the crisis, and everything that's medium to long term. Well, you will need to review and validate all the strategic business and business development plans. So this will foster changes in the current practices of the procurement services and other services of the company too. On the procurement side, you will need to prioritize the action based on the key suppliers and products, as we did for managing the crisis. Develop an action plan, or just follow up with the one you currently have and continue feeding it and following up with it. Establish or maintain the communication channels, and if all necessary, because we already know that some companies are more at risk. According to the latest survey that we did, and that we published, it was about 16% the suppliers that or manufacturers that were questioning their survival. That doesn't mean that 16 will die, but it means that there's a question mark beside their company's name. And find already alternative sources of supply for all of those which you're uncertain for. And finally, coordinate procurement with other business activities to make sure that the operations remain stable. Réal, would you like to do the postmortem part?
Yeah, thank you, Pierre-Laurent. So after we are back to the more normal, we are back on track, everybody is happy. and we are very enjoyed to get rapidly on the normal side of the life. Uh, we forget and we forgot to do a post-mortem. So there's some few questions. I will not answer it, but there is some few questions in order to do a good post-mortem in order to implement some new best practices in your organization. So question will be, do you have a contingency plan? Do you have a plan B based on your supply chain, on your critical supplier? Do we manage in communication structure? Is it facilitating the decision making? Okay. Uh, does the information was available in the accessible to? What is the dependency on our supply chain? Who is impacting our supply chain? After that, can you please, Pierre-Laurent, I think you keep, yeah. What is the weak links of our supply chain? What we can reduce, what we can eliminate, or what we can transfer, and when we talk about transferring, it's can we transfer our parts of responsibility to our supplier base? What is our supply chain maturity? Are we flexible enough to adapt our action to the reality in the market? And the last one, does our supply chain is able to catch some new business opportunity? So these are some questions that you should reflect in and answer in order to create an action plan and do some change on your supply chain.
Thank you, Real. Hopefully, all these questions will lead to a good action plan there. At Stick, we diagnosis. We do some business diagnosis very frequently. We have different programs, and we did see that about 75% the companies do not have currently any risk management. So hopefully the post-mortem will lead the companies to establish those good practices.
You know, Pierre-Laurent, on this topics, I can tell you on our side, near 85% of the company that we do some evaluation or do some assessment do not have any terms and condition in their PO. So that's going to be something that they can address. Yeah.
Right. We are now in the question period. We have a few questions. Real, you might want to answer this one. Is there any new regulations or restrictions that should be taken into account for goods transportation?
As I know right now, the doesn't have new regulation. Do new regulation will appear in the near future? I think yes. Okay. And again, I was telling about the terms and condition and the contract, and those regulations will be placed in the terms and condition and the contract. But right now, as we spoke, I don't be aware about new regulation about good transportation.
Right now, we see that the frontier is open between for goods between Canada and United States. There aren't any regulations currently within Canada, but this may evolve in all depending on your supply chain, where your suppliers are located. There might be different regulations applied, so you will need to ask the question to the companies you deal with. If they're not based here and you don't know their current context, because it varies really from a region to another, in all depending the different initiatives that will be taken by the different governments, whether it's at the provincial or federal level, and of course in other countries. The situation may be evolving. Also, there might be some variations in the agreements for international commercial rules. So we'll want to keep up with that too, because the companies will adjust. But mainly right now, it's a question that, as Réal said, that is being handled through the company agreements in between them.
But if I can just add this thing, yes, I'm a customer right now that asked to their supplier when they deliver goods to send all the packing slip by email before, in order to limit the contact with the driver. And this customer particularly asked to their supply base that the driver or the clerk, the reception clerk, doesn't have any contact with the, for example, like Groupe Robert, Bolloré, and so on, so on. So it's not regulation approved by some government, but it's internal new regulation. So depending of your activity, you can take this type of action.
All right. We also have a question about N95 masks, how to purchase them in Canada. Do you have any insights on that?
But listen, right now we are directly doing business with the Ministère de la Santé et Services Sociaux, and it's a big process in order to get approved as a supplier. So if you are a new supplier, that's going to be a long trail in order to get approved. Where we can, who are the supplier in Quebec? Honestly, I don't have this answer right at my top of my head. But listen, if I think I got your email, I can send you some suppliers' name.
All right, thank you very much. Those were all the questions we had today. Thank you very much, Réal, for your collaboration with this presentation. And thank you all for attending this webinar. We'll be sending you shortly a survey and also a copy of the presentation. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.